Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing the 20 questions to get to know me better tag, which I was tagged in by Emily at Novelle Novels. I will link her video down below. As far as the original video for this, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do that much searching, but I still didn't see it in the few videos that I looked at. So if you are able to find that, please let me know so I can link it down below and give them the credit where it's due. But yeah, I couldn't find it. Emily didn't have it on her video, I don't believe, and I couldn't see it on any others when I looked up this tag. So again, please let me know and I will immediately put it in the description. I just don't have it right now and I'm kind of in a rush today. So anyway, let's just get into the questions. I feel like this is actually a great tag to do right now because I just recently did the favorite things tag, which was a lot of fun. I will link that down below as well if you're curious about it. But that one's kind of more focused on things other than books that I enjoy. And this one will help you get to know me more as a reader, which I think is always fun. So let's get into these questions. So the first question is, how many books is too many in a series? And I would say my comfort zone is probably around 5 books in a series. I am okay with up to that amount. After that, it gets a little more iffy. I would say there are series I enjoy that have more than 5 books in the series, so it's not impossible for me to like them. I just tend to prefer a little bit shorter series, but again, that is dependent on the series itself usually. Question 2 is, how do you feel about cliffhangers? And I think I am different from most people in regards to this. I know a lot of people really hate cliffhangers, and while I don't necessarily love them, I don't get as bothered by them as other people do. I mean, I get it when it's a situation where you read the book and the next book doesn't come out for a year or more, and so you have to wait for answers, and that's frustrating, but it's still, like, in the end, it doesn't really bother me all that much. And in fact, sometimes cliffhangers are helpful because it means that the book has a much more memorable ending, which means I'm a lot more likely when going into the next book, you know, a year or more later, that I'll remember what happened, at least to some extent. So I think they're actually helpful in that way. So I would say I don't necessarily love them, but I'm a lot more okay with them than a lot of other people seem to be. Question 3 is hardcover or paperback? And this is actually a hard one for me. I've thought about this question a lot because it's one that's asked periodically on BookTube, and I don't really care that much. I'd probably say paperbacks just because they are easier to read from, but hardcovers stay nicer longer and they just usually look nicer. So it depends on what I'm doing with them, but I'd say probably on the whole paperback, but it's not like a huge difference between my like of paperbacks versus my like of hardbacks. So yeah, that's where I'll put it for now. Question 4 is favorite book, and this is so hard. I have like top 4 favorite books, so I'm going to just mention each of those, not go into depth because like I said, I kind of want to get through this video quickly. But anyway, so my top 4 that kind of switch around a little bit as my favorite are Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and Harry Potter, the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Although I think I'm gonna throw in my 5th favorite because this one also does tend to become my favorite sometimes, and that's Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. So those 5 kind of are interchangeable as my favorites. Question 5, least favorite book, and I feel like I can say without a doubt that it is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have attempted to reread this recently. Didn't even finish it, despite the fact that it's under 200 pages. I just couldn't do it. I hate this book so much. So I'm going to say that one because that one I know definitively I actively hate. Question 6, love triangles, yes or no? And I've mentioned this before, but I really like love triangles primarily in classics, because in classics there's a lot more going into a relationship than just romance. There's also, you know, social and economic things to consider, and it's a lot more complex. So I really think they are done well in classics. Like Thomas Hardy does a lot of love triangle type stories, and they're always interesting because you genuinely don't really know who they're going to end up with, because sometimes they don't end up necessarily with the one they love more or feel more passion for. So I feel like it's very intriguing when it's done like that because it's discussing a much bigger social issue. And so I find that interesting. Most of the time in more recent novels, I don't tend to like them because usually you know exactly who they're gonna end up with because it's obviously the person they seem to like more. So I feel like nowadays they're not done very well. They're done just for the sake of angst, but like they're so predictable and I don't like that. But when they're done in a way where they're not as predictable and they have a lot more going into them than just which one do I love more, I really, really like them. Question 7 is the most recent book you just couldn't finish. And for this one, I'm going to go back to The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald because that was the most recent I DNF'd, but that was a few months ago. I haven't DNF'd anything since then. I don't DNF all that often, just because most of the time I'm not a huge, I don't really like beginnings of books anyway, and I kind of expect it to be a slow start a lot of the time, and there's a lot of books I've read where it had a slow start, but I ended up falling in love with it. So I'm willing to push through a slower beginning and even a slower middle most of the time, although sometimes, like with The Great Gatsby, I just can't do it. Question 8 is a book you're currently reading, and the one that I'm loving the most of the ones I'm currently reading, I'm liking all of them, but the one I'm really enjoying the most and that's causing me the most thought is He Knew He Was Right by Anthony Trollope, which is a story about a marriage that is falling apart because they're both very stubborn. But it's interesting because since the man has a lot more, legal power in her life, he is much more in the wrong in a lot of ways, and he's causing a lot more issues than she ever could, regardless of how stubborn she is. So it's a really interesting story to think about, and then there's some other side plots as well that are also very intriguing. So definitely one that I am really enjoying, and hopefully will get 5 stars. We'll see how it goes. Question 9 is the last book you recommended to someone, and the last book I recommended to someone was Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I am reading the sequel right now, and I recommended, well, sort of. I was telling my sister about it, and she said she would be interested, and I said, I definitely think you should read it. So that one's the last one I most recently remember recommending to someone. Question 10 is the oldest book you've read, and the oldest book I've read is the oldest novel, or I guess fictional story that's ever been written, well, okay, that we still have, I should say, and that is the Epic of Gilgamesh by, I think it's anonymous. So I read this for school, and it's the earliest piece of literature that we still have, so definitely that one. Question 11 is the newest book you've read, and I need to consider that for a second because I don't usually read new releases all that often. I'm not totally sure on this, but I'm going to say The Forgotten Kingdom by Signa Pike because I know that just came out last year, and that's pretty recent for me in general. There may have been another one that came out this year or later last year, but I believe that one came out in September of last year, so chances are pretty high that is the most recently released one that I've read. Question 12, favorite author. I'm going to go with Thomas Hardy, of course. I love Thomas Hardy so much. I mean, definitely not all his books are on the same level for me, but I really like a lot of what he does, so definitely Thomas Hardy. 13 is buying books or borrowing books, and as much as I want to be more of a borrower of books and go to the library, I just like buying books. I like having my own personal library that I can just pick from at will and I can just grab from. I just struggle with borrowing books because I have so many books on my own shelves, and I also, you're limited on time to read when you get something from the library, and I just want to be able to read at my own pace, whatever I want, and make sure that I have books that I am actually interested in and I don't have to seek through the library to find those. So definitely buying books for me personally. 14, a book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. And for this one, I've already mentioned The Great Gatsby, so I'm not gonna mention that again. I think I'm going to mention the Ember and the Ashes series by Sava Tahir. Now, I loved the first one, but I read the second one and I really was not impressed, and I actually DNF'd the series after that. But I feel like most people tend to enjoy it pretty steadily the whole way through. I do think some people do tend to feel less in love with the second book as the first one, but they tend to continue with the series and enjoy it enough. But I just didn't, unfortunately. It just became a stereotypical YA fantasy to me at that point. I feel like the first one had things in it that I really liked. It kind of went there in ways that I really enjoyed, but after that it it lost me, unfortunately. 15 is bookmarks or dog ears, and I'm definitely a bookmark person. I think most people are, but I have nothing against people who dog ear their books. I don't care. It's their book. It's not my business. I honestly don't even care if people dog ear like library books. I know that sounds like horrible, but I'm like, genuinely, like, it doesn't bother me all that much. So nothing against that, but for me, I do prefer to use bookmarks. 16, a book you can always reread. And I feel like this is hard when I already mentioned my top five favorite books, but I think for a book that I consistently have a desire to reread outside of my top 5 favorites, I think I'm going to go with Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I feel like I regularly am interested in rereading it just because I feel like it's a book that as you grow older and develop and change, your opinion of it changes and your thoughts on the characters change. And so I feel like it's one that I consistently want to go back to, and yeah, it's a delight to reread, honestly, because it has so many interesting aspects to it. 17, can you read while listening to music? And I do tend to struggle depending on what type of music it is. Sometimes I actually purposely listen to like instrumental music. So for example, I really like to listen to the Far From the Madding Crowd soundtrack while I'm reading, just because sometimes my brain is like all over the place and so it's hard for me to settle down and focus on reading. So music helps me by like creating something else going on while I'm reading, so I can kind of like slow down a little bit and get into reading. And then sometimes I'll start up the music, or sometimes I just keep it going if I feel like it's giving good ambiance. So I can do it with instrumental, but as soon as there's words, I tend to have a harder time reading while listening to music. 18 is one POV or multiple POVs? And I think I'm going to say one POV, because in general, I do think it's better executed to do it with one POV because it's hard to do multiple POVs. I think you're more likely to fail with multiple POVs, and I've read many books where they had multiple POVs where I think it would have been better if they had lessened the POVs or just gotten rid of them altogether. But to be honest, I actually really like books where it's just third person, and so we are getting technically multiple POVs, but we're able to, I don't know, see just different things that are going on. Like, and I think they do it better actually in like classic literature. I think more recent books, they tend to, you know, this chapter is from this perspective and this chapter is from this perspective, and it's harder to make it feel smooth. But I feel like in Victorian literature, because a lot of it, for example, I'm reading He Knew Who Was Right by Anthony Trollope, like I mentioned earlier, and that one's multiple POV because each chapter is going to a different person, but within those chapters, you're seeing different people's perspectives in those scenes, if that makes sense. So more like a third person omnipotent, where they're able to get into everyone's head, and they do that throughout the chapter. I feel like that flows better. So I'm more willing to do it that way, and I actually really like that, especially if it's a big book. It's helpful when you're able to get into multiple perspectives, because then I feel like a long book in one perspective can be harder to get through. It can feel slower. So I think there are occasions where I actually do prefer multiple POVs, but overall I think I tend to have less issues in books with a single POV, if that makes sense. Question 19 is, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Definitely over multiple days. I can't even remember the last time I read a book in one sitting. I like doing that when I can, but I'm just too busy with school and work in my life right now. I just really don't have time to read a full book in one sitting most of the time. Yeah, so I definitely read across multiple days. And question 20 is, who do you tag? So I'm going to tag 2 people, I guess. We're going to tag Mason in the Dark, who is a recent subscriber that I've loved being able to chat with recently, and he has a fun channel, so definitely check him out. And then if she ends up watching this, I think I'm going to tag Megan the Story Girl. I recently did a buddy read with her and a bunch of other lovely ladies of The Other Bennett Sister, and really enjoyed that experience. And she's commented on a couple of my videos. I think she's been taking a break, maybe? I know she hasn't posted much on her channel recently, but if she's watching this and wants to do it, definitely do. I'd be very curious to hear what her answers are. So anyway, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below your answers to some of these questions, as I would love to know, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!